Morbid Facts, Part 786. During the filming of Sinister in 2012, the chilling home video scene showing a family being hanged nearly turned into a real-life tragedy. The stunt used actual harnesses and cables to simulate the hangings, but on the very first attempt, something went horribly wrong. One stunt performer slipped from their foot stirrups, causing the harness to immediately tighten around their neck. They were briefly severely choked before the crew had to cut them down, leaving everyone on set horrified as they'd almost witnessed an actual hanging. Director Scott Derrickson immediately shut down production, fired the stunt coordinator on the spot, and later admitted it was one of the scariest moments of his career, as a scene that was meant to terrify audiences had almost claimed a real life. In 1996, Karen Wetterhahn, a respected chemistry professor at Dartmouth, accidentally spilled just a few drops of dimethylmercury onto her latex gloves while conducting an experiment. The liquid seeped through in seconds, but she didn't know it, and for months she felt perfectly healthy. But then her speech began to slur, her balance faltered, and tests revealed her body contained 80 times the lethal dose of mercury. As the poison attacked her nervous system, she slipped into a coma, paralyzed but still aware, before dying 10 months after the accident at just 48 years old. Morbid Facts, Part 785. In 2021, 75-year-old cyclist Dave Richards was hit by a drunk driver in Bristol, England, suffering catastrophic injuries that left him with burns across half his face, a shattered pelvis, and the loss of an eye. For years, he avoided mirrors and crowds, haunted by his own face and the looks of strangers. But in 2025, doctors at the Bristol 3D Medical Center gave him something never performed before: a 3D printed facial prosthesis that perfectly matched his skin tone, hair, and eye color. Using detailed scans of his head, they built a custom silicone replacement that restored the face he'd lost. In June of 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman proudly posed beside his science fair project on tree frogs at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon. It would mysteriously end up being the last photo ever taken of him. Moments later, Kyron was seen walking down the hallway toward his classroom and then upright vanished somewhere inside the school building. Despite an immediate search of every classroom, closet, and crawl space, no one ever saw him leave. When he didn't return home that afternoon, police launched one of the largest search efforts in Oregon history, combing the surrounding woods and rivers for months. His stepmother, Terry Horman, was the last person to see him alive but was never charged. 15 years later, the boy who disappeared inside his own school has never been found. In 1978, 15-year-old Mary Vincent was hitchhiking through California when 51-year-old Lawrence Singleton offered her a ride, a decision that would lead to one of the most horrific crimes in modern history. After gaining her trust, Singleton bound her with rope, brutally sexually assaulted her for several hours, and hacked off both of her arms with a hatchet before throwing her off a 30-foot cliff to die. But Mary somehow found the strength to try and survive. Naked, pouring blood, and mutilated, she packed mud into her wounds to slow the bleeding, then crawled up the steep mountain and walked for miles down a deserted road, leaving a trail of blood behind her. The first car that saw her sped away in shock, but a honeymooning couple eventually stopped and saved her life, wrapping her in towels and racing her to help. While barely clinging to consciousness, Mary gave police a description so accurate that it led to Singleton's arrest within days. But despite the unimaginable brutality of his crime, Singleton served only 8 years before being released on good behavior, and just over a decade later, he struck again just like Mary said he would. In 1997, police found the body of 31-year-old mother of 3 Roxanne Hayes inside his home, stabbed multiple times and left in a pool of blood, murdered after he lured her inside under false pretenses. Singleton was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, but died of cancer in prison in 2001 while awaiting execution. Mary survived, learned to live with prosthetic arms, and became an artist and advocate for victims' rights. Morbid Facts, Part 315. In 2006, Abraham Shakespeare won $30 million in the Florida lottery and tried to use it to help others, giving away large sums to friends, family, and even strangers. But sadly, his generosity made him a target. A woman named Doris Dee Moore pretended to help manage his finances, slowly taking control of his assets while isolating him from loved ones. In 2009, Abraham suddenly vanished without a trace. Months later, his body was found buried beneath a concrete slab behind Dee Dee's property, shot twice in the chest and covered with lime. In 2012, Moore was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Florence Lawrence, often called the first movie star, rose to fame in the early 1900s and became one of the first film actors to be publicly credited by name. At the height of her career, she suffered a devastating injury in 1915 when a staged fire spiraled out of control, leaving her with severe burns and a fractured spine. Universal Studios refused to pay her medical bills, and her career never recovered. Over the years, she faded into obscurity, taking uncredited roles and struggling with chronic pain and depression. When she died in 1938, she was buried in an unmarked grave, as Hollywood had all but forgotten the woman who helped define it. Morbid Facts, Part 263. On the left is the last known photograph of Australian sea kayaker Andrew McGauley. In January of 2007, he attempted a 1,000-mile journey to cross the Tasman Sea but was never seen again. 1 month after he embarked, Andrew's damaged kayak was found just 30 miles from his destination. His body was never recovered, but his camera's memory stick was found inside the kayak and contained these final images. Binky the polar bear lived in the Alaska Zoo in Anchorage for decades. In 1994, he mauled 2 visitors who jumped over the safety rails on 2 separate occasions. After the maulings, the zoo sold Binky merchandise with the slogan, "Send another tourist, the last one got away." In 1976, Stomatis Moritis from Greece was diagnosed with lung cancer and told he only had 9 months to live. But 10 years later, he returned to the doctors to show them that he was still alive, only to find out that he'd outlived all of them. He ended up beating the doctor's predictions by 37 years, finally dying at age 102. Morbid Facts, Part 784. In 2003, 17-year-old Jessica Santillan came to the U.S. from Mexico with her family, who had crossed the border illegally in a desperate bid to save her life. Jessica suffered from a congenital heart defect, and after years of struggling to breathe, Duke University Hospital agreed to perform a rare and risky heart and lung transplant. The operation began as a miracle in motion until everything went wrong. The organs Duke transplanted came from a donor with the wrong blood type. Jessica was O positive, the donor was type A. Within a few hours, her body went into violent rejection. Her skin turned purple, her body swelled, and doctors realized the unthinkable mistake. They'd given her incompatible organs. 2 weeks later, they found a new donor and performed a second transplant, but Jessica never woke up. She was declared brain dead on February 22nd, 15 days after the first transplant. A family who risked everything to save their daughter lost her to a clerical error, and her death forced hospitals nationwide to overhaul how transplants are verified forever. Morbid Facts, Part 458. Amanda Eller was lost for 17 days in the Maui wilderness after a 3-mile hike turned into a full-on nightmare. She set out on foot without a phone, food, or water since she only planned to be out for a short adventure. But after veering off the trail, she wasn't able to find her way back. The 35-year-old later managed to survive a flash flood with a broken leg and suffered many hallucinations throughout the ordeal. She said she kept hearing voices that were telling her what to do if she wanted to survive. Amanda was eventually spotted by a helicopter pilot who turned a different way that nobody would normally search on a whim. In 2022, an Irish woman was hospitalized with extreme stomach pain and had to have her appendix removed after years of holding in farts around her boyfriend. Constance Fisher was a paranoid schizophrenic who murdered her 3 children in 1954 to save them from evil. She spent several years in a mental asylum before being released, only to kill 3 more of her children in 1966.